everyone. My name is Adam Williams, and you are listening or perhaps watching to another episode of Retail Redeveloped. Now, today's episode, I'm very excited. Everything conspired against us to not do this episode. Literally floods, scheduling, meetings, you name it. This is the third or fourth time we've tried to have this episode. But the reason that I wanted to make sure we did this is because I'm being joined by Diaz Nesamoney. Now, a lot of you guys probably do not know that name, but once you hear a little bit about his experience and his bio, you'll understand why I was so excited to have him on the show. He has a new book out right now. He's the author of Personalized Digital Advertising, How Data and Technology Are Transforming How We Market. But that's just what he has done this week. He has a massive career. He's the CEO of a company called Jivox. Before that, he was the CEO of a company called Informatica, which is a $6 billion market cap company. He has a master's degree in computer science. He serves on a board at Yale. I mean, the guy's bio is frankly making me a little nervous to even have him on the program because he's done so much. Diaz, thank you so much for joining us today. If you wouldn't mind, would you take a second and just explain to people, better than I just did, who you are? Talk to us a little bit about how you came to sit in the seat that you're in, and just tell us a little bit about the why behind your business and how you got here.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Despite the floods and all the fun stuff that was going on, I'm glad we finally got back together. So I can, just start with a little bit of my background. So I'm an engineer, computer scientist by training, and became an entrepreneur just because I did work for a very big company and quickly realized that was not my thing. And then after I became an entrepreneur, I realized that's the only thing I know how to do and kept doing it. Onto my third company now. For this company, it was quite interesting. It's about 13, 14 years ago. And this was when Google was just kind of the big thing. I remember here in Silicon Valley, everybody had Google envy. It's like this company came out of nowhere and became worth billions of dollars. So that's what kind of got me into the business of digital marketing and advertising. And my background just with Informatica and Southwest, my previous companies, was all in enterprise software. So we built software for big, large global companies. And so I knew nothing about the world of advertising or marketing. But I figured, hey, they need software and automation like other parts of the business. And that's what got me going. And of course, looking at Google's growth and market cap, it felt like I needed to be in on the action. So that's kind of what got me into digital marketing and digital advertising software, which is what we do here at Jivox.
So obviously, you've had a storied career. Walk us through kind of what is Jivox? What is its secret sauce? What do you guys get up and get excited about working on every day? And just walk us through a little bit about what you guys do and why it's so important to these companies.
Yeah, so, what Jivox does is, and if you go back 13, 14 years ago and look at how advertising itself was done, most brands were doing mostly, TV and print advertising. And so the mindset was about one message to everybody, right? Reach as many people as possible with that single big message. So agencies got paid lots of money to come up with that one tagline, one message, and so on and so forth. But Google, actually showed how you can actually micro message or bring relevance to get consumers engaged, right? So you search for something because you're looking to buy that, and they were able to deliver to you content related to that, and that got consumers to purchase. So really, it was about how do we help these brands transform from that one-size-fits-all messaging to very precise messaging and content that is relevant to what they're looking for, what they are likely to buy. So that's kind of the premise that we had coming into the market. And what was interesting is, just coming into the market from kind of a software background, it was kind of just shocked to see how antiquated and manual a lot of the processes were, because again, keep in mind, brands were used to working with big TV ad agencies and print ad agencies to come up with that big message. And we were trying to take them completely to the opposite end of the spectrum.
So obviously, this playing field changes daily. Like I can't turn on Instagram without thinking that they're reading my mind, because I just had a big tree fall in the yard, and all of a sudden I'm getting Husqvarna ads every time I turn around, just because they know that I have a tree down and they want to sell me a $500 chainsaw. So I mean, obviously that looks very seamless to me, but there's massive amounts of tech and data and money being spent behind the scenes to make it look seamless. Walk us through how that has changed over the last few years, and how now it is just kind of status quo. It's normal, but obviously you've seen that kind of come from its infancy. Walk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right in that, there's a lot of tech involved in automating the entire process of delivering relevant and tailored messaging. To do that, so first of all, just think about this. So if you look at the process to create a single TV commercial for everybody versus almost a TV commercial for every individual, right? So you get yours, I get mine, somebody else gets theirs, right? So technologically transforming your content with different messaging, different products, relevance related to what's happening around you, preferences, so based on past purchase history. So all of that data has to come together. So one part is, how do you integrate all that data together so you can identify the preferences and what a specific consumer is likely to buy or want to buy. And then you look at it from the content side. How do you scale the production of content so that, if you had to spend as much as it costs to produce a TV commercial, but do it for 10 million individuals, that's impossible, right? If you had to produce banner ads where instead of one message every, you produce hundreds of thousands or even millions of different variations of it, that becomes impossible and cost prohibitive. Even if you had the money to do it, there aren't enough people in the world to actually do it. So the automation was on both fronts, right? How do we automate the process of collecting data, precise data, and using that to tailor the content messaging? And then secondly, how do we scale the production of the content so it's precise and relevant to a specific consumer? So what the software is doing essentially is using the data and using the content, different versions of the content tailored to individuals, and delivering it on demand to those consumers.
It doesn't even sound easy when you say it and you're an expert. And I can't imagine the time and effort it took to do this. Let me ask you about, let me dig into the data portion for a moment. I've heard it said on this show and other places that you've got kind of two sides of the scale, right? You've got Facebook on one side, you've got Amazon on the other side. Facebook knows who we are, right? Like they know that, maybe I don't scroll so fast over pictures of my ex-girlfriend because I want to see if she's still alive or whatever, versus, just other stuff. But Amazon knows what we buy. I mean, I literally have a box sitting. I'm sure I have a box on my porch right now from Amazon. And that data, there is two very different swaths of data. And whoever can figure out how to marry those two is going to be the next major player, the next major disruptor. Is that, am I making this too simple, or do you buy into that? Or is somebody already figuring that out? And as a layman, I just don't know it yet.
No, you're right. It is about the data ultimately, right? And as I said, data is the new oil, right? It's basically the currency with which commerce is going to be done in the future, right? So in other words, whoever has the most data about consumers and whoever knows how to harness it well and tailor content and products and so on to those consumers will ultimately win out. Now, there's the other side of data, which is sort of, you have the pressures of privacy controls and so on and so forth kind of coming into the picture. And there's even people who would say, oh gosh, we don't want brands knowing so much about us, or getting that sort of into our lives. But I think there's actually been surveys of consumers saying that they ultimately like the idea of personalization, because the reason people say, oh, we don't like so many ads. There's ads everywhere. Part of the problem is that to get engage with the consumer, brands are having to spend so much money and push so many ads at people because they're not very tailored. So you're going to see ads for things that you don't care about. And even when it's a brand you do care about, you're not going to see the ads for the product within that brand that you're likely to buy, right? So in some ways, personalization is solving the problem for the consumer too, which is show me something relevant and I'll engage and I'll probably buy. Don't blast me with thousands of millions of ads of everything you have and make me do the hard work of picking and figuring out what I want, right? So it is as much a consumer convenience that's at play here, much like, I go back to Google, right? So before we had search, right? Like, okay, I want to find, a new pair of shoes or whatever. Like, how do I do it, right? Do I call every single store, watch a TV ad for Nike and say, okay,
I remember that. I remember calling around trying to find Jordans when I was a little kid.
So there you go, right? So Google made it really simple. It said, okay, just type it in here and we'll find first of all the information there is out there about shoes, how to compare them, how to, all the reviews, but we'll also tell you where to buy it, right? That was the convenience. I think everybody's using search for almost everything now. So similarly, I think when it comes to advertising, right, the both brands and consumers benefit from relevance, right? So the more relevant a brand can make their content and not interrupt you constantly with stuff that's irrelevant, but get you something precise and tailored. Consumers like that. Consumers engage with brands that are intelligent, that are smart, that know what they want, and maybe even anticipate what they want even before they know they want it, right? So that's what's at play here. It turns out it's really hard, right? It's technologically quite challenging, and that's essentially what we've been working on for 13 years here at Jivox.
So not to get too philosophical, because this is a business show, are you ever conflicted with privacy concerns? Obviously, that's becoming more and more of a hot button issue as time goes on. Netflix is coming out with documentaries that are kind of showing the dark side of social media and the dark side of how engaged we are all the time. Do you ever find yourself conflicted, or does it go back to kind of the capitalist, like if we provide convenience, we should be rewarded kind of philosophy? Or, do you ever spend time thinking about that?
Yeah, I do. And I think we as a company have been very conscious of that and actually advise a lot of brands. And I had a couple of brands, and when this happens once in a while, they'll say, hey, can we put the name of the person in the ad and say, hey, Adam, we noticed and I just stopped the conversation right there saying, no, the short answer is no, you don't do that, right? So I think
a little creepy.
Very creepy, and a lack of respect, right? Like you didn't give them permission to do that, and so I think more privacy. Everybody wants privacy, but if you really look at the consumer surveys and stuff, what they want is consented use of data, right? That's the way I would look at it. Which is, I have certain brands that I use. Marriott's a great example. I stay at Marriott hotels, not recently, but like when I used to travel a lot. And I'm perfectly fine with sharing the data with Marriott. That'll be useful in how they engage with me, whether they recommend hotels for me to stay at or amenities of the hotel that I go to. That's perfectly fine. I have no problem with that. But when a brand who I didn't give any permission to use my data starts using my data and gets down to that level of creepy, that's a problem. And I think the industry has not had many standards around it. I remember folks called me when GDPR and CCPA came on and said, oh my God, isn't that going to affect your business? And I said, gosh, it's the best thing that ever happened to our business. You know why? Because we need a clean, well-lighted marketplace to play in, right? It can't be this murky, where data gets shared, sold, resold. And, that's not good for the industry. So we've been pretty vocal about that and actually have been very proactive in making sure those standards are enacted, making sure that we are compliant with them, and also getting the industry behind it, saying, look, guys, we have to present a very consented, privacy compliant value proposition to consumers. And brands care about it too, right? Because brands also don't want their consumers unhappy with how they're using their data. And so net, I think privacy regulations have been great for the industry and for personalization and all the things that we do.
So let's go back into the industry side of things. Who in the business, and this could be, at the brand level, as shallow or as deep as you want to go, or this could be you at the big tech level, who is doing a really good job of this personalized advertising? Is there a specific sector, a specific brand that you think gets it a little bit better than others? And if so, I'd love for you to unpack a little bit about what they do that has been so effective, or what they do that impresses you, that makes you think that it will be effective in the future.
Yeah, so I think personalization, as we talked about earlier, requires data, right? So the brands that were able to do it well from the get-go were the ones who had access to consumer data. And not every brand does, right? So if you look at the CPG companies, because they don't, or traditionally have not directly sold products to consumer, they didn't even know who was buying their product, right? You go buy a toothpaste from CVS, Colgate doesn't know that you bought that, right? So, retail brands, auto brands, hospitality brands, airlines, et cetera, probably had the most data or access to data, and they were the ones to develop excellence in how do you use that data to create personalized experiences. And personalized in many ways. If you look at, Marriott, for example, a tremendous respect for the brand because they took personalized to even mean your hotel stays, right? Not just personalized advertising, but when you walk into the hotel, just the whole experience, right? So the loyalty program they introduced and so on, all of that showed that the brand really wanted to make an experience as opposed to just market to you or sell to you, right? So they've done a great job. Retail brands, not all of them, but at least the ones that were kind of more digitally forward thinking, have done a good job. Auto companies, I think, to some extent have. The ones who have done a good job have sort of done it out of necessity because they were interacting directly with the consumers. The ones that were going through retail intermediaries or others that resold their products just didn't have the data to create those personalized experiences.
So how do you touched on retail brands and how they use data. I think about these two major categories, right? You've got the legacy brands, the brands like Marriott, the brands like Nike, the brands like Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson that have been around for years and years and years that are just part of our consumer psyche. And then you have the kind of the nouveau brands, and these are a lot of them are direct to consumer brands, DTC brands. So Allbirds, Warby, pick the sexy brand that everybody's excited about right now. These direct to consumer brands have this data collection built into their DNA. It was like day one. It was probably digitally native. It was the most important part of their entire brand. Allbirds wouldn't be what they were today if they didn't know how to capture data and know who their customers were and what they were buying. How does a legacy brand, which is a big brand, which it's hard to steer, it's hard to make decisions, a lot of red tape in a lot of these organizations. How do these legacy brands compete with these nouveau digitally native brands when things are changing so quickly? And to your point, data is the new oil or the new currency.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And, it's a question that's been asked for probably the last 3-4 years as these new direct-to-consumer brands have come out of nowhere and quickly gotten scale with tons of venture capital money being thrown their way. In some ways, COVID has been absolutely horrendous for everybody in every possible way. But the silver lining there has been it's forced some of the legacy brands to come to grips with, the over-reliance on a retail distribution channel where they did not have those direct relationships, because that retail distribution was largely brick and mortar driven, and people had to go into stores to do stuff. The direct-to-consumer brands prove that you don't really have to, and you can order anything, things that you never thought you would order online. Eyeglass is a good example, right? Like you always thought you had to go visit a optician, get this and get that, and then buy this expensive $500 pair of eyeglasses. And I think Warby Parker and others prove that you don't have to, or at least that there's a market for people who just want a convenience, quick, inexpensive solution. With COVID, I think these big brands suddenly, just out of necessity, because all of a sudden, and I've spoken to many of them, the retail supply chain got so badly disrupted that the sales kind of went like that, right? So very quickly, there were the direct-to-consumer efforts that many of them had, but were moving at the pace that they tend to do in these large companies that have been around for many, many years, had to kick into high gear. And, they had to move quickly. Nike was phenomenal at doing that. It's been publicly reported now their digital sales went up significantly, and it's because they were prepared. Not because they knew COVID was happening, but because they saw this trend towards direct-to-consumer sales. So they had e-commerce working, they had the digital marketing around e-commerce working. They had all that. And so they were prepared, and they saw massive growth in that channel because they were ready to market directly to consumers. Others didn't do so well because they just weren't ready. And now what we see is these brands all thinking about direct-to-consumer e-commerce, top of mind, investing heavily, even at a time when their business has been impacted. It's amazing how many conversations I've had with some retail brands. In fact, one of them actually filed for bankruptcy as we were having the conversation with them, and came out of it and said, hey, let's keep going because this is the future. Right? We have to invest in direct-to-consumer marketing technology, e-commerce marketing technology. So the silver lining with COVID has been, I think that these big brands have had a bit of an awakening and are pushing hard. Even though these DTC brands are digitally native and have that advantage, I wouldn't assume that they're the winners ultimately in this battle.
Why? Unpack that.
Well, because, it's dollars and mind share, right? I think some of these DTC brands had the benefit of the big brands not paying that much attention to that category or that direct-to-consumer style sales and marketing. But now they don't anymore. And when, if you look at marketing spend overall, the sizable budgets are still with the big CPG companies. So if they point that weapon in this direction, direct-to-consumer, it's going to be tough. I'm not saying direct-to-consumer, the new direct-to-consumer brands cannot be successful. I'm just saying the success that got them to this point is not sufficient to keep them being successful, because now they're going to contend with much bigger budgets, much better known brands, right? And, if their only advantage was they could sell online or market online, that's not good enough. So I think they have to develop further excellence in marketing and digital marketing to say, while you guys are catching up to us, we're going here, right? And they have to sprint further ahead with AI and machine learning and more automation and sophistication that, and Amazon has shown that over and over again, right? Like that's what got them to this leadership position. But I think these direct-to-consumer brands cannot assume that their first mover advantage is going to last.
Do you think that they just get swallowed up by, let's just stick with the sneaker example. Do you think Allbirds is just a sub-brand of Nike at some point? And these guys, once they realize that Nike can just outspend them, that, they join them?
There will be probably some consolidation. In fact, we saw some of that even earlier this year.
I think about it in the craft beer scene, right? Like Anheuser-Busch is like, oh my God, we're getting our lunch eaten. Let's just buy all these brands before they kill us.
We saw that in the razor categories and I know Edgewell tried to do an acquisition. In fact, it changed the game so much the FTC stepped in and blocked it. So yes, there'll be ones that don't think they can make it or not funded well enough to power through the marketing that they're going to have to budgets they're going to have to face. And there's others that are well funded and perhaps have a niche cult following that can keep it because they're building brands, right? And so the ones who know how to build big brands will be able to power through it. The question is, the others who are not well funded and maybe are very niche brands may not be able to survive the onslaught of big brand marketing, and they may have to just fold and get rolled into one of these companies. And those companies may see it as a quick way to get there without having to build it from scratch.
Right. It's such an unbelievable time to be in this world. It literally, I feel like every single day in my inbox waiting for me when I wake up is another bombshell of either, obviously some company died, some new company was born, some new innovation that I didn't see coming is announced. It's just unbelievable. Well, Diaz, you have a career, a massive career, and I don't think that you're sitting around, stressing out about how to make money through writing a book, right? Walk us through your book and why a guy that's as busy as you are, it's not like you're kicking your feet up in the Bay Area, retired. You're still working. So what pushed you internally or externally to want to write this book? And tell us a little bit about the why behind the book and explain to us, why you had to get it out of you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so you're absolutely right that when I was approached by a publishing house to write a book, I thought to myself, like, do I really have time to write a book? But what inspired me to write it was a couple things. One is I felt like I was having the same conversation with a lot of senior marketing folks at these big companies. And the conversation was about both the importance of one-to-one personalized marketing and the technological hurdles of getting there, and ergo use our software to help you automate all of that and get there, right? That conversation was challenging just because of the legacy a lot of these big brands had of doing it completely the opposite way, which is one size fits all messaging, very manual, very agency driven models, right? So I said, okay, I'm saying the same thing over and over again, and it's taking a lot of effort to get people to that level of education and understanding. So it just made perfect sense. I said, well, why don't I just write all my thoughts down, put it in a book, and hopefully people read it and see both kind of where they have been, where they are, and where they could be, and most importantly, what the business benefits are of doing so. I got, as part of the book, some very senior, forward-thinking marketing execs from Marriott and and some agencies and so on. I said, guys, you get this. I get it. We're all working towards that goal, but we need the whole market to get it. So they actually, in my book, wrote a few chapters of their own because I wanted it to be not about, hey, I'm a really smart guy, I'm going to tell you what to do, but about this revolution that, really started about 13 years ago and where it's really hitting that inflection point right now.
So two questions. One, tell me the perfect person that should read your book. Like, obviously everybody should read your book, but tell me who you wrote it for. Who is that avatar that you think would really gain the most from reading your book? And then two, if you wouldn't mind, after answering that question, tell us a little bit, just the ethos behind the book. Like if you had to put one sentence out there to explain to people what it's about, what you're trying to get across, what would it be?
Well, it's a book that demystifies the technology and the process of personalizing marketing. So it's a demystifying book. So what I really tried to do in the book is to kind of simplify a lot of the acronyms people hear about and all the terminology and all of that, because it's bewildering. I mean, if you're a marketer of a big brand and you've been, you're obviously very, very smart and you've built a great brand. it's kind of crazy to be listening to all the acronyms like, AI and data management platform and this and cookie syncing and all that stuff. And it's bewildering. And that sometimes misses the point. The point is, how can you harness technology to get to this new way of marketing, right? So the book is about demystifying that. It's meant for senior marketing exec, C-level, or maybe one click below, to understand what it means, why you should do it, because that's a good question. You don't do things just because people thought you should do it or technology vendors thought you should do it. What's the business benefit of doing it? How do you get there? What are the hurdles? What are the challenges? And how can technology help do it in a scalable way? And also the behavioral changes that have to happen in these organizations to adopt the technology and to use it to get that benefit, right? So it's a I would say a 30,000 foot level book, so it doesn't get too much into the nuts and bolts of technology, but it tries to tie the marketing strategy of personalization to the technology that's needed to make it happen.
Well, Diaz, you've already been extremely gracious with your time. I'm going to ask you a couple kind of knee-jerk questions before I let you off the hook and turn the cameras off. But before that, would you just take a second and explain to people, where can they find the book? Where can they find out a little bit more about your company and what you guys are doing? Where they can connect with you, if you want people to connect with you? Just explain to people how they can interact with everything that you're doing.
Sure, yeah. So the book is available on Amazon. So if you just do a search on Amazon with my name, they should be able to find that. Or they can just send me a note, diaz@jivox.com. I'm on email. Some people think it's 7x24, but it's really more like 7x20 maybe. So I'll be happy to respond and either connect with them or point them to where they can get the book.
Awesome. So Diaz, tell me one thing that you see a lot of people doing wrong in your business. If there's one common thread or one kind of low-hanging fruit that you see brands that they can be doing better, what would that be?
I think brands need to do a better job of taking ownership of the digital side of marketing, because it's no longer the smaller half of marketing, it's becoming the bigger half. And especially with COVID, it's becoming a very big part of how you have to do marketing. So I think this industry has outsourced a lot of that traditionally to agencies and to third parties and even to vendors saying, just go solve it for me. I think to have excellence in it, you have to take ownership of it. You have to bring it in-house. And many brands are doing that. So I'm really encouraged to see that, because that's the way you get to excellence with it.
And what about the other side of the coin? People that are doing it really, really well. Is there a common thread that you see with those guys? Obviously, investing money and having a plan is the first part, but are you able to see kind of a common thread with these guys that are doing it really well and that are taking it really seriously? Can you kind of point to something that binds them together?
Yeah, I would say don't stop, right? Because I think it's easy for the innovators to think they're so far ahead that they can rest on their laurels. The technology and innovations in this market are changing literally every day. And so if you're, it's not, you have to keep moving, right? Because as we talked about earlier, the bigger brands are coming in and they're investing heavily and they have a lot of money to invest. So the innovators, I think, and the companies that are doing well can't assume that what they're doing well today is going to be sufficient to stay ahead. So I would encourage them to keep doing what got them there, but perhaps at even bigger scale and run even faster than they did to get there.
All right, I want a bold prediction. Obviously, COVID has turned everybody's world upside down. It's turned the marketing world upside down. It's turned retail upside down. I want you to give me something contrarian or something that you think is going to come out of this in the digital marketing or advertising world, or even the brand world, that maybe everybody's not talking about yet.
Well, I think the effects of COVID on retail and commerce are not temporary. I think they are permanent. Digital commerce was less than 20% of overall sales. My feelings, it crossed 30-40% very quickly and is on its path to get to easily half of commerce, probably within the next 3 to 5 years.
That's a big number. Big number.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. Tell me a brand that I should know, but I don't. Somebody that maybe is just getting started that you've seen that has impressed you, that hasn't kind of entered the consumer consciousness yet.
Well, one of the brands that we love working with, and it's probably because I'm a foodie too that I like them, the Sunbasket. I
have one downstairs.
Yeah. So they're a cool brand. We love working with them. So yeah, we'll definitely give them my plug here as an innovative brand. I think it's going places.
I'm fascinated to understand how that business is going to evolve over the next few years, because it's the margins have to be razor thin. And it went from, I can't remember who was the first one. It was HelloFresh or I can't remember who was kind of the first group to do it. But I went from the first time seeing that being like, oh my God, that's a good idea. Like I don't want to know that I have enough basil in the fridge. I just want it to be there and know that I can make this cool meal, because we love to cook. And now, how many are there? There's got to be 20. So
it's a very competitive market, but and the margins are low. But we've seen companies like Instacart and DoorDash just went public. Like when you look at those businesses initially, you're like, that's a very low margin business. Like how do you make money doing that? But it's scale, right? So it's if you can achieve scale, there is a need clearly, and the margins are low, but scale solves the margin problem, right? And I think I think the winners there are going to be the ones that achieve the kind of scale that a DoorDash did and others did in their respective markets, which is why you see the big venture capital guys just sort of bringing truckloads of money and unloading it at some of these companies, because that is the game. It's a game of scale and brand building and great marketing and all of that. But scale is what gets in there. It doesn't sound like I would have never thought that kind of business would be a viable, profitable business, but we've seen several examples of it.
Absolutely. Well, Diaz, I just want to take 1 second and acknowledge you for coming on, even though we had to reschedule this thing too many times. I'm so glad that you stuck with it. I, for one, learned a lot in this interview, and I know that there's some branding people out there, some advertising people out there that did as well. So I just want to take a second and say thank you and acknowledge you for coming on and spending your valuable time to talk with us and share some knowledge.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam. It was a pleasure, and thanks for having me on.